What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka JustTenMoreMinutes, aka the Freakin 10, back again with Sabaton history. First time covering a part 2 of something. There's some other ones that have parts 2 and 3 that I haven't gone through, but this is one that really got my attention with Laurie Allen Torney. I try to pronounce him correctly, but I know I mispronounce. With the Soldier of Three Armies, it's a fascinating story because you've got this guy who, you know, is obviously a son of a Green Beret, as they mentioned in the song, and then fought in that first war, and excelled, and as the song says, was promoted quickly, got his own group, and really was a part of something that I find is fascinating in the sense of the sheer numbers game and versus understanding the terrain and understanding the land and how much that can play into war and strategy, right? Because they talked about that some of the densest forest in the world, and you know, then having the weather and the snow on top of that you're used to, you know how to hide in it, you know how to move around in it very, very quickly, and really showing as they funneled them through there of how they were able to really hold them back for quite some time. And eventually, you know, have the treaty signed. So I wanted to do this part 2. I don't think I'm going to be able to do part 3 this morning. It's 5:35. And so quite honestly, you're probably going to see me pause about 10 minutes into it. At least go on mute on my mic and send an Alexa notice to get my daughter up. I don't edit. I'm a real person. Y'all are real people. Y'all don't deserve anything less than just seeing human life and in daily existence. I'm not here to be perfect. I'm here to give you real. So, you know, if you see that, that's what's going on. I'm waking her up. It's 5:35. She gets up for school in 10 minutes. So let's go into it. Let's switch it up. Let's listen to this part 2.
This is the second part of a We're Doing It Over Skype because we're in quarantine because of Corona trilogy.
And the song is Soldier of Three Armies.
I'm going to play with the audio a little bit as Indy talks because his voice was extremely
This is part 2
loud.
of Soldier of Three Armies. Now, as you can see, I am not in Germany at the studio because of Corona. I am at my home in Stockholm in my living room. My friend Ryan is filming me. Say hi, Ryan.
Hello.
The lighting is whatever lights we have lying around. So here we go. The Winter War between Finland and the Soviet Union came to its end in March 1940. It had ended with the Finns successfully preserving their independence, but they still found themselves between a rock and a hard place. Many Finns found it hard, if not impossible, to believe that Joseph Stalin would keep his word, and that this was closer to a temporary ceasefire than a lasting peace. In the West, the German war machine was on the move, taking Denmark and Norway. Sweden had kept its neutrality, but had to allow German troops transit rights through its territory. How long could Finland remain independent? In January 1941, Finnish Army Chief of Staff Erich Heinrichs visited Germany to get a clear answer. German High Command assured him that an invasion of Finland was not in their interest, but Adolf Hitler did have a role for Finland to play in a new endeavor, the invasion of the Soviet Union. Thinking that they barely had a choice, they agreed to assist the German war effort, but only under certain conditions. Finland was to be a co-belligerent, not an actual ally. It would not join the Tripartite Pact, seeing war against the Soviets as separate from World War II, and would only open hostilities to achieve Finnish interests and revenge. For the moment, this was good enough for Hitler. Lauri Tarni had remained in the Finnish army after the Winter War. Word came that this new cooperation offered Finnish veterans the opportunity to train and serve in the German military. See, to many, that was reminiscent of the Great War, when Finnish volunteers had trained in the Imperial German Army, which later founded the Finnish Jäger movement. Those Jägers had served as the backbone of the victorious whites in the Finnish Civil War. Many of those veterans were now part of the Higher Officer Corps and organized the transfer of young volunteers to do the same thing.
That's fascinating to me in the sense of, and I don't remember what the time span was in between after they signed the treaty and then, you know, with Hitler. Was it 39 with that first invasion? So are we still kind of in that 39, 40, 41-ish? That's the hard thing about it, right? Because you had already had Germany go in and take Norway as they showed on the map, right? So then you got Sweden that is kind of trying to remain neutral, and then trying to figure out, what Finland was, what role that was going to play. Man, I've never dove into the wars like this, and so to find all these little intricate things, both good and bad, is very fascinating to see.
German High Command, however, insisted that the Finns not be trained by the regular German army, but by the Waffen-SS. The Waffen-SS had evolved as the militarized arm of the regular SS, the notorious instrument of Nazi power. The Nazis saw the Waffen-SS as not only the most elite military force, but also as the bearer of Germanic and Nordic culture in concert with National Socialist ideology. So it welcomed men from the Nordic countries into its rank. Lauri Törni, now a first officer, was among the 1,400 volunteers that made their way to Germany. What motivated Törni was not Nazi ideology or the prospect of fighting for Germany. He was a soldier, not a politician nor an idealist. He hated communism, he hated the Soviets who had invaded his homeland and even taken his family home, but there's no evidence that he endorsed fascism of any kind. It was for him an opportunity to train alongside what many saw as the elite of Europe, a cadre full of highly motivated and determined young men, equipped with the best weapons and trained by the best commanders.
Yeah, I wouldn't, that's not even a thought that entered my head. As soon as he said he volunteered, my first thought is, I wouldn't see, for someone like him that fought against the Soviets like that, and believed the things he did, that never entered my mind that he would have, aligned with them. It was more of training and the ability to then go fight the Soviets again.
Or so he thought. He reached Germany in mid-June 1941 and was then sent to Vienna. Now wearing the death's head and the black uniform of an Untersturmführer, he began a brutal training regimen that honed his skills as a light infantry leader. But when Germany invaded the Soviet Union and Finland reopened the Northern Front against the Soviets, Törni wanted to join the fight, not for Germany, but for Finland. After 7 weeks of harsh training, his contingent was sent back to the Baltic coast to await its deployment on the Eastern Front. Now here, the stories differ. One source says that Törni was designated too problematic and sent back to Finland. Another says he smuggled himself on board a ship. Either way, by late July, Lauri Törni found himself back in Finland and immediately headed for Karelia. The Finnish army was advancing deep into Soviet Karelia, taking back the territory Finland had lost in the Winter War. Törni now joined up with the 8th Light Infantry of the 1st Division. He made good use of his Waffen-SS training and was even assigned to lead a unit of captured Soviet tanks. Soon he was seen driving far ahead, throwing grenades into the Soviet lines. The first 6 months of the Continuation War, as it would be called, went well for the Finns. Viipuri, Törni's hometown, was liberated and his family returned to their old home. By then, the Finnish army had pushed far into Soviet territory. Many hailed them as liberators from the communist yoke, but, there was also the realization that they were the aggressors now. The Germans urged them on further to close the siege of Leningrad, but Finnish Commander-in-Chief Mannerheim refused. They had advanced enough and would instead create a new defensive line.
So that as soon as I saw that he had taken back their home, but they taken back the hometown, they had become the aggressors because they signed a treaty. And if the Soviets weren't advancing on that or doing that, I get the German part and Germans. Now, I don't know the intricate, so there's probably a reason why they decided to be more aggressive with that stance and do it. But they had signed that treaty, and now here we are breaking that treaty and then taking the advance. Now, I don't know if that's because they thought, that they could take back the land that they had lost in the battle with the Soviets. I'm assuming that was probably the case, that they missed that. They missed that land and probably the resources and families' homes and stuff like that. But that's an interesting discussion.
In December 1941, 2 years after fighting the Winter War, Turney once again led infiltration and reconnaissance missions deep into the enemy lines. Crossing frozen lakes and skiing through the snowy countryside, they bypassed Soviet outposts, trying to locate their supply depots instead. Turney led a team of highly skilled veterans, demolitionists, sharpshooters, hand-to-hand combat specialists. His men proudly sewed an orange T on their uniforms, identifying themselves as part of Detachment Turney. Turney himself was becoming a living legend. He was already widely respected as an unconventional but highly capable leader, and stories abounded, like how he once stumbled across a position of Soviet soldiers and killed all 30 of them with only his Suomi submachine gun. The gun, it was said, was as unpredictable as its wielder. But even the enemy knew his name. Soviet propaganda frequently broadcast that they wanted Lauri Turney dead or alive. The bounty on his head was soon raised to 3 million Finnish marks.
Started out as a reserve, soon promoted well deserved, and the legend has begun. With a bounty on his head, the Red Army wants him dead. Soviets enemy number one.
Yeah, I'll rewind it just a little bit. Think about that, right? You're fighting in a war, and you are hated so much and feared so much that they put a bounty on you. Dude's a badass.
By March 1944, though, it had become pretty clear that the German army was facing collapse on the Eastern Front, and even the siege of Leningrad had been lifted. It was only a matter of time, and Finland needed a way out. For months, Finnish politicians tried to get Stalin to agree to a new peace treaty, but no dice. Now the Soviets were becoming more aggressive. The more ground the Germans lost, the more the pressure on the Finnish front increased. Then in June, Finland once more saw itself against overwhelming odds as a huge Soviet offensive began to knock the Finns out of the war. Over 10,000 pieces of Soviet artillery opened up on Finnish positions all over the Karelian Isthmus. Turney was, as always, in the thick of fighting. Moving from division to division, his unit served as a fire brigade, counterattacking the Soviets wherever they broke through. Despite irreplaceable casualties, the Finns held once more. However, this was not sustainable. But after Finnish chief diplomat in Moscow, Juho Paasikivi, openly warned that we will shoot from behind every stone and tree. We will go on shooting for 50 years. We are not Czechs. We are not Dutchmen. We will fight tooth and nail behind every rock and over the ice of every lake. The Soviets were finally willing to speak of peace, on condition that Finland would not only immediately break any relations with Germany and extradite all German personnel from Finland at once. The other conditions for peace were about as harsh as the terms after the Winter War, which we saw in Part 1. But unconditional surrender was avoided. On September 7th, the treaty was signed. Finland once more retained its independence. In the middle of all this, Lauri Turney had learned that he was to be honored as a Knight of the Mannerheim Cross for his natural and resourceful leadership during the war. This was Finland's highest military honor for valor and gallantry. Hitler, of course, took Finland's separate peace with scorn and ordered the German soldiers retreating through Lapland towards Norway to scorch the earth behind them. But this was not the end of cooperation between Finland and Germany. The Gestapo, the German secret police, was already starting a new operation called Sonderkommando Nord. This was to assist the Finnish underground that was forming among Finnish veterans. With a secret radio network and weapons deliveries, Finland was to be prepared for guerrilla operations against any Soviet takeover. And while many Finns distrusted the peace, communist influence was growing rapidly in Finland, and Soviet agents and spies were everywhere. It seemed like only a matter of time until Finland would need its soldiers once again.
This is the, I mean, and I don't know Finland's history, obviously, as well as a lot of you do. But the thing that gets me about this is Finland's truly between a rock and a hard place, right? I mean, because you have Germany on one side, because I think they still had Norway at this point, and you had Sweden, but then you had the Soviet, right? And you just can't. Stalin was just unpredictable, and so yeah, I mean, you think about the position that they're in of trying to play both sides, and wow.
Although Nazi Germany was on the verge of collapse, the Gestapo offered to train Finnish veterans for secret operations. Turney, always restless, agreed, and by the beginning of January 1945, boarded a German submarine that would take him to the secret training camp. From January to March, Finnish SS and German Gestapo officers taught the volunteers secret communications techniques, coding and encryption, and advanced sabotage and demolition techniques. Training, though, was interrupted by the rapid Soviet advance and was relocated to the Danish border. Turney stayed there till April, and then here again, the stories differ. One story goes that to escape the Soviets, he made contact with one of Felix Steiner's detachments that were unable to break through to Berlin and instead surrendered to the British. Later, he escaped imprisonment and made his way back to Finland. Another story goes that he grew disillusioned with the Germans and felt deceived. He then escaped the training camp and with false papers made his way through Denmark and Sweden to Finland. Again, either way, by late 1945, Turney was once again back in Finland, back in civilian life. The warrior came home, for now. But his story does not end here, for he was a soldier of 3 armies, and this was but the second.
Shout, loud return his name. A soldier of 3 armies knows the game. It's that echo from the past. Rise from beyond your grave, son of Finland and the Green Beret. May you rest in peace at last.
Now, this episode is a little more, I'm not going to say serious, because since all of your songs are military history, they all obviously cover serious topics of life and death, but it's a little darker, and I know it's a little more controversial because of the specific subject matter of who Lowry was fighting with. But before we talk about this, you said you've actually been to his grave, right?
Yes, I've been to Arlington. Is it once or twice? I can't remember actually. Well, yeah, I had to go and search on the computer to find his lot number, and man, there's a lot of graves, a lot of dead soldiers there.
Yeah. I've never actually been. You'd think it, as a historian and a military historian, that'd be a place that'd be big on my bucket list, but I'm never in
And
that
an
part of the
American.
world. That's true. Yeah, that's true. Now, question. Now, what they might not know, because we haven't mentioned it, it's going to be mentioned in part 3. Later in life, after the things that happened in this episode, Lowry Turney changes his name to Lowry Thorne, right?
Yep.
And of course he's buried in Arlington because he did some service with America. It's not too much of a spoiler to say that he did stuff with the Americans. Does his grave say Lowry Allen Turney, or is it just Larry Thorne, or what does it say?
Larry Thorne. Maybe there was something, I can't remember now, but maybe we got a clip of that.
Okay.
Somewhere.
Yeah, let's see it.
Well, here we are. Larry Allen Thorne.
Major.
So is that something you or the whole band or some of the band does a lot? Like, I know you visit military sites, but particularly memorials and graveyards and stuff?
Yes and no. I mean, we did a whole lot in Verdun actually when we were there.
Sure.
I love to see these places. It's a matter of respect,
Yeah.
especially if it's people we sung about.
Yeah.
But also, at the same time, I don't really want to do it on a show day. It's a bit of a party pooper, if you know.
Oh,
what I mean.
yeah.
But Arlington seemed, I would recommend anyone who is in the DC area to go there. I wouldn't say travel from halfway around the world to see Arlington, but if you're in the area, I'd say it's one of the bucket list things to do. Artie Murphy there, you got JFK, and
Right.
I mean, thousands upon thousands of graves. And the grave of the unknown soldier, which is still being watched, even though of the coronavirus. I saw actually on the news.
And which is
Great.
interesting is we did the Diary of an Unknown Soldier 2 weeks ago. That episode came out, so it's pretty recent for us. So anybody out there that didn't see it, it's a pretty good episode about how the whole concept of memorializing the unknown soldier as an everyman came out. But hey, interesting point. You say you don't want to do it, when you're on tour and when it's a show day. If you have let's say you have a tour from March 1st to March 31st through South America, how many free days would you have in a 31 day? I mean, is it like only 4 or 5, or is it like 12 or 13?
That would depend. If we're on a tour bus on a month, we would do about 22, 23, 25 shows maybe, usually.
Okay.
We do average about 5 shows per week. If we're going to do Russia or South America, it's a lot of fly shows. So, and that means the days off are also travel days. And sometimes when you travel in between, you have to connect in some main airport hubs. So there will be a bit fewer. I think 1 month in South America, we're talking 18 to 20.
Okay, well, that's cool. So yeah, you can spend 10 days looking at war memorials.
Yeah.
I'm giving everybody ideas. That's me, making them always think. That's my job in life. But hey, back to something else I wanted to ask you about. A lot of people view it as controversial that Finland fought the continuation war, not as an ally of Nazi Germany, but as a co-belligerent. Some don't, some do. It makes perfect sense to me. I mean, Soviet Union had invaded Finland. Germany was actually the only European country that had treated Finland decently in any way during the Winter War. France and England were real jerks. If you go to my World War II channel and follow the Winter War, you'll see that the people that were supposed to be supporting them failed to support them. But I understand also because it is Nazi Germany, it is Adolf Hitler's Germany, and people say, how can you ally yourself to such monsters? Although it wasn't entirely apparent until after the invasion of the Soviet Union what monsters they actually were. But what do you say about that?
Well, in a sense, it doesn't really matter because we're storytellers, not commentators on these things. I mean, we're not doing this to spread any propaganda to say what's right or wrong. We want to tell the most interesting stories,
right?
From the point of view we find the most interesting. And in this case, I would have to say Lauri Alantorni really qualifies because what he did in his life as a soldier really qualifies him to be
especially the stuff this week. The stuff that we heard about today. We like going to Germany and getting trained and not being in the the Germans not having them trained by the army but by the Waffen SS. And that's it gets weird. I think this episode is definitely going to inspire people to dig around and dig a little deeper into it. Let's save the rest of the stuff we have to say about Lauri Alantorni or Larry Thorne until part 3 of what's the name of this song?
Soldier of 3 Armies.
See you next time.
Take care.
All right, everyone. Thank you very much for watching, and thank you so much for the support with the community. All the Patreons, everyone who's helping, sharing this. We really love doing this, and thanks to you, we can keep on doing it. So keep on doing what you do, and we will keep on doing what we do. Thank you.
Oh, come on. My favorite part is when he says, get the fuck out of here. Okay. So the controversial part, right? For me personally, right? Just an outsider looking in many years later, it is a double-edged sword because you are working with the Germans, not as an ally, but as they say, kind of the co-belligerent, I think is how they put it. There was such hatred for the Soviet Union at the time, and here's someone that is going after them. And I think because land was taken and all of that, I think they truly were between a rock and a hard place. So for me, I don't see it as controversy, kind of like what Indy said. I get where the controversy would be, but at the same time, because of the battle they had during the Winter War, losing that land in the treaty, and I'm sure much more stuff that, again, he covers on his side that they don't cover in this, that it made a little bit more sense for them to do that. That's, again, not for me to decide. That's just my personal take on it. but I don't have, you know, all the same intricate details that Indy would have. So this is where I turn to my amazing community to say, you know, what y'all think of was that controversial? Again, to me, it made perfect sense just based on the Winter War and that just deep hatred for the Soviets at the time. But again, I don't have all the facts. So fascinating. If you think about the main focus, right, with him as a soldier, just being, he reminds me a lot of the unkillable soldier, right? In the sense of no matter what, that was just in his veins. And they talk about that, right? A lot when you think about soldiers, that once they're in a war, trying to return to civilian life is not easy. We hear about it daily and the things they go through. And some soldiers just can't adapt to normal life. And that's the way I see Torny is he's not a civilian by nature, right? He's not going to hold down a 9 to 5. He is a soldier. And when you're instilled also being trained by the Waffen SS, that's a whole nother level, right? Of being a soldier with just that utter discipline that they had. Makes it fascinating. And to know he then came to the US, I'm very interested to hear that story. Now that one's going to come out Thursday. I don't have time to film that one today. It is now 6 a.m. and I've got to get kids ready for school and all of that. And I have my little one today. She still has the flu. And so, you know, I'm not going to have any extra time to record. So, you know, I'll get that one out on Thursday, but I want at least to get the 2 parts out today. If you're ever in the US and you do get to visit the National Cemetery, it's a fascinating place, not in the sense of fascinating of ooh ah, it's just the way that it's designed and the way and you know the graves you say, as I said, you know, Audie Murphy's there, JFK is there, obviously Torney is there, but it just gives you an idea over time, number wise, right? And it's a very solemn place, but also it makes you appreciate things a little more. And I'm sure other countries have it as well. But if you're ever in that area, you know, and you're a historian and that type of thing, take a look. It's a fascinating place from that sense. All right. I'm not going to switch it up and switch back and give any final thoughts because there is a part 3 to this. But you know what to do, guys. Like, subscribe, share. The support is absolutely amazing. I'm not going to do all the graphics. You know what to do. So part 3 will be out on Thursday. Until then, have a great week. I'm JTMM.